People say silence is weakness, but sometimes silence is the only weapon you have left. I'm sitting here now in my quiet home, the afternoon sun streaming through lace curtains I hung 40 years ago. On the mantelpiece sits a photograph me and David on our wedding day, both of us young and foolish and so terribly in love, or at least I thought we were. My fingers, wrinkled and spotted with age, traced the silver frame. Sometimes I wonder if that young woman in the white dress would recognize the person I've become. Sometimes I'm grateful she can't see what was coming. The grandfather clock in the hallway, a wedding gift from David's parents, chimes 3 times. It's been with me through everything, through the happy years, the terrible ones, and these quiet days at the end. Its steady ticking has been the soundtrack to my life, marking time even when I wished it would stop. It all started 35 years ago, when my husband hired a young secretary named Claire. We lived in a modest suburban home in Northern California, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's names and children played freely in the streets until the streetlights came on. Our street was lined with maple trees that turned brilliant gold every autumn, and in spring, the air smelled like honeysuckle and fresh-cut grass. I was 32 years old, David was 35, and we had 2 beautiful children, Michael, age 10, and Sarah, age 8. Our house had a white picket fence, quite literally, and a garden where I grew tomatoes and roses. I remember those summer evenings so clearly. David would come home at 6:30 sharp, loosening his tie as he walked through the door. "Honey, I'm home," he'd call out, and the kids would race to greet him. He'd scoop Sarah up in his arms and ruffle Michael's hair, asking about their day, genuinely interested in their small dramas and triumphs. Then we'd all sit down to dinner together, the 4 of us around our oak dining table, passing dishes and sharing stories. I had dreams once. I'd been accepted to a graduate program in literature at Berkeley, had plans to teach, maybe even write. I'd spent my college years buried in Austen and Brontë, Woolf and Morrison. I loved the way words could build entire worlds, the way a well-crafted sentence could break your heart or put it back together. My professors had encouraged me, told me I had potential, that I should pursue my doctorate. But when Michael came along, David and I agreed it made sense for me to stay home. "Just for a few years," he'd said, kissing my forehead as we stood in the hospital, looking down at our newborn son. "Until they're in school. Then you can go back." Then Sarah arrived 2 years later, and those few years stretched into a decade. I told myself I was happy. I told myself that raising children was its own kind of achievement, that motherhood was noble work, and most days, I believed it. I threw myself into being the perfect housewife, the perfect mother. I joined the PTA and organized bake sales. I hosted dinner parties where I served pot roast and homemade apple pie. I kept the house spotless, always had fresh flowers on the table, made sure David's shirts were ironed and his favorite meals were waiting. I read to the children every night, helped with homework, coached Sarah's soccer team, attended every one of Michael's baseball games. Our neighbors, the Hendersons, would often comment on what a perfect family we were. "You and David are so lucky," Margaret Henderson would say, watching us at neighborhood barbecue. "So in love after all these years, so happy." And I'd smile and agree, and I meant it. I thought we were lucky. I thought we were happy. David worked at a mid-sized insurance firm downtown. He was good at what he did, meticulous, charming with clients, always climbing the corporate ladder. I was proud of him. I'd wake at 6 every morning to make his coffee just the way he liked it, 2 sugars, a splash of cream. I'd pack his lunch with a little note tucked inside, silly things like "Have a great day" or "Love you," with a heart drawn in the corner. I'd iron his shirts until they were crisp and perfect, making sure the collar laid just right. On Friday nights, we'd have dinner as a family, and David would tell stories about his workday that made the kids laugh. He'd do impressions of difficult clients, exaggerating their quirks until even I was giggling. I'd watch him across the table, animated and handsome in the soft dining room light, and feel a warm contentment settle in my chest. This was my life. This was enough. We had our routines, our rhythms. Saturday mornings, David would take Michael to Little League while I took Sarah to her piano lessons. Saturday nights, after the kids were in bed, David and I would share a bottle of wine and watch old movies. Sundays were for church and family dinners, pot roasts and mashed potatoes, the kind of meals that took hours to prepare and minutes to devour. Looking back now, I can see how fragile that happiness was, how it rested on foundations I'd never examined. I can see how I'd made myself small, made my world small, built everything around David and the children until there was almost nothing left of the girl who dreamed of teaching literature, of writing her own stories. But at the time, I didn't see it. I just lived it, day by day, believing this was what love looked like. Then came the promotion. "They're making me regional manager," David announced one evening in late October, bursting through the door with his briefcase in one hand and a bottle of champagne in the other. His eyes were bright with excitement. His whole face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. "It's more responsibility, better pay. We can finally get that new car, maybe take the kids to Disneyland this summer, maybe even think about that addition to the house you've been wanting." I hugged him, thrilled for him, for us. The old station wagon was on its last legs, and I'd been dreaming of adding a sunroom where I could read, and so we celebrated with champagne after the children went to bed, making plans for our future, toasting to David's success. We made love that night with a passion that had become rare after 10 years of marriage, and I fell asleep feeling secure, feeling blessed, feeling like everything was falling into place. Neither of us could have known that promotion would be the crack that shattered everything. "I'll need help managing the workload," he said about a week later, scanning the newspaper classifieds over his morning coffee. "The company approved hiring a secretary. They've already found someone, a recent graduate from Stanford, very bright apparently, strong references. Her name's Claire." I remember feeling nothing but mild interest, perhaps even relief that David would have support at work, that he wouldn't have to stay late so often, that we might get more evenings together as a family. "That's wonderful," I said, refilling his coffee cup. "When does she start?" "Monday. I'll meet her then." I kissed him goodbye at the door, straightened his tie, told him to have a good day. Just another morning, just another kiss. I had no idea I was kissing the man I knew goodbye the first time. I met Claire was at the company holiday party that December. The party was held at the Hilton downtown, in a ballroom decorated with white lights and silver garlands. I'd bought a new dress for the occasion, navy blue, conservative but flattering, had my hair done at the salon for the first time in months, thought she was young, couldn't have been more than 24, or 20-5- with honey blonde hair that fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, bright blue eyes, and a smile that seemed to light up the room. She wore a red dress that hugged her figure, showing just enough to be interesting without being inappropriate. I noticed how several of the men's eyes followed her as she moved through the crowd, how she seemed comfortable with the attention, even expected it. "Mrs. Patterson," she'd said warmly when David introduced us, extending a delicate hand. Her nails were perfectly manicured, painted a soft pink. "I've heard so much about you. David talks about his family all the time. You must be so proud of him. He's absolutely brilliant at what he does." "Please, call me Mary," I replied, charmed by her enthusiasm. By the way, she seemed genuinely interested in meeting me. She asked about the children, their ages, what they were interested in. She complimented my dress, told me I looked elegant. She asked if I worked outside the home, and when I said no, she smiled understandingly. "That must be so fulfilling," she said, "raising children, creating a home. I admire that so much. My own mother worked my whole childhood, and I always wished she'd been home more. Your children are lucky to have you." I warmed to her immediately. She seemed sweet, respectful, perhaps a bit naive but earnest. She talked about her job with excitement, how much she was learning, how grateful she was for the opportunity. "He's such a wonderful boss," she said, touching David's arm briefly, a gesture I now recognize as the first boundary being tested, the first step across an invisible line. "So patient when I make mistakes. I was terrified I'd mess everything up in my first week, but he was so kind." David smiled at her, a warm, paternal smile that made me feel reassured. "You're doing great, Claire, really. The office would fall apart without you already." I smiled, feeling proud. That was my David kind understanding, willing to mentor young people just starting their careers. The next week I sent her home-baked cookies to the office, chocolate chip with pecans. It was something I did sometimes for David's colleagues, a small gesture to build goodwill. David brought home her thank you note that evening, written in perfect cursive, on cream-colored stationery. "Your wife is as wonderful as you said," it read. "Thank you so much for the cookies, they were delicious. You're both so kind to me. I'm lucky to work with such a great family man. Warmly, Claire." I tucked it into my recipe box, pleased that she appreciated the gesture, happy that David had such a nice person working for him. How naive I was, how trusting, how completely blind. The The changes started so gradually I almost didn't notice them. Or perhaps I noticed but chose to ignore them, afraid of what acknowledging them might mean. It's hard now to pinpoint exactly when the shift began. Was it January, February? The winter months blurred together, and by the time I recognized the pattern, I was already deep in the quicksand of denial. It began with the late nights. David had always worked hard. It was one of the things I'd admired about him, his dedication, his ambition. But suddenly he was staying at the office until 8, 9, sometimes 10 o'clock. At first, it was occasional, then it was twice a week, then it was more often than not. Big project, he'd explained, loosening his tie as he walked through the door, his dinner cold and waiting in the oven, trying to land a new corporate client, the Peterson account. If we get it, it could mean a huge bonus. Claire's been helping me prepare the presentation. She's actually brilliant with this stuff. Catches details I miss. Claire's name started appearing in his sentences more and more. Claire suggested we restructure the filing. System saved us hours. Claire found an error in the Henderson account. That could have cost us thousands. Claire made me laugh. Today, with the story about her cat knocking over her coffee maker, Claire thinks we should approach the Wilson account differently. Told myself it was natural. They worked together 40 hours a week. Of course he'd mention her. I mentioned my friends from the PTA all the time. It didn't mean anything. But then I noticed he smiled when he talked about her. His voice would get lighter, more animated, the same way it used to sound when he talked about me, back when we were dating. Then came the missed family dinners. David had always made it home for dinner by 6:30, no matter what. It was our sacred time, the anchor of our family routine. But now his chair sat empty more nights than not. I'd keep his plate warm in the oven, covered with aluminum foil, and the children would eat quietly, the joy slowly leaching out of our meals. "Where's Dad?" Sarah asked one evening, her small voice carrying a hurt that made my heart ache. She was pushing her peas around her plate, not eating. "Working late, sweetheart. He's working very hard for us, for this family. He's always working," Michael muttered, stabbing at his chicken with more force than necessary. "Why'd he even bother having kids if he's never here?" "Michael," I said sharply, though his words echoed my own thoughts. "That's not fair. Your father loves you very much. He's working hard to provide for us." But even as I said it, doubt crept in. Was he really working? Or was there something else keeping him away? I started noticing other things, small things that individually meant nothing but together formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. The way he'd shower immediately when he got home, even though he'd showered in the morning. The whispered phone calls where he'd step outside into the garage or backyard, speaking in low tones I couldn't quite make out. The vagueness when I'd ask about his day, answers that were somehow both detailed and empty of real information. "How was work?" I'd ask, trying to keep my voice light, trying not to sound like a nagging wife. "Fine, busy. Same as always," he'd respond, not quite meeting my eyes, already moving toward the stairs, toward the shower, toward distance. He stopped touching me casually. There was a time when he'd grab my waist as he passed through the kitchen, kiss my neck while I was washing dishes, hold my hand while we watched television. Those touches disappeared. When he was home, he'd sit on the opposite end of the couch, absorbed in paperwork or the television screen. When I'd reach for him in bed, he'd claim he was tired. "Long day," he'd say, turning away. Maybe this weekend, but the weekend would come, and there would be another excuse. One morning, I was sorting laundry, a mundane task I'd done thousands of times, and found a smudge of lipstick on the collar of his white dress shirt. Coral pink, bright and obvious. I didn't own any coral pink lipstick. My colors were muted soft roses and mauves, appropriate for a woman my age, a mother, a wife. I stood in the laundry room, holding that shirt, feeling my world tilt slightly on its axis. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The washing machine hummed. Everything was normal, and nothing would ever be normal again. I scrubbed at the stain until my hands were red and raw, scrubbed until the fabric started to thin, as if I could scrub away what it meant, as if I could wash away my suspicions along with the lipstick. The stain wouldn't come out completely. A faint pink shadow remained, like a scar. I didn't confront him. I was afraid of the answer, afraid of becoming that suspicious, nagging wife that men complained about, afraid of what it would mean for our family if my suspicions were true, afraid of being right. So I folded the shirt and put it back in his closet, that faint pink shadow hidden beneath the collar, where no one would see it but me. The perfume came next. I'd hug him when he came home, and there it would be, a scent that wasn't mine. Something floral and young, expensive. Notes of jasmine and vanilla, sweet and cloying. It clung to his jacket, his hair, his skin. Each time I smelled it, something inside me withered a little more. I knew that scent. I'd smelled it at the Christmas party, standing next to Claire. I threw myself into being a better wife. I made his favorite meal, spot roast on Monday, chicken piccata on Wednesday, lasagna on Friday. I lost 10 pounds through a combination of stress and skipped meals. Telling myself it was intentional, that I was improving myself, I bought new lingerie I couldn't afford, charging it to a credit card and hiding the statement. I tried to be interesting at dinner, telling him about the books I was reading, asking intelligent questions about his work, laughing at his jokes even when they weren't funny, but he seemed distracted, distant, as if he was physically present but his mind was somewhere else, with someone else. I'd watch him across the dinner table, and it was like looking at a stranger. This man I'd loved for 18 years, whose children I'd borne, whose home I'd created, he was disappearing right in front of me, and I was powerless to stop it. One evening, I was helping Sarah with her homework at the kitchen table. She was working on a book report, chewing on her pencil the way she always did when she was thinking. The kitchen was warm, the oven still radiating heat from the dinner David had missed. Again, she looked up at me with those big, serious eyes that sometimes made her seem older than her 8 years. There was something in her expression, a worry, a question she'd been holding back. "Mom," she said carefully, as if testing the words, "why does Daddy talk to Miss Claire so much?" My pen froze midair. I felt my heart stop, literally stop for a beat. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I called his office yesterday. You said I could, too, tell him about my spelling test. I got 100%. Pride flickered across her face, then faded. The lady who answered said he was busy talking to Miss Claire and couldn't come to the phone. But when he called back later, I heard him. He was talking really quiet and happy. Different than when he talks to you. The words hit me like a physical blow. Different than when he talks to you. Out of the mouths of babes, I managed to smile, though my face felt like it might crack. I stroked her hair, soft and silky under my fingers. "That's wonderful about your spelling test, baby. I'm so proud of you. And Daddy is just busy with work. Miss Claire is his secretary, so they have to talk about work things. It doesn't mean anything. But it meant everything. And we both knew it, even if Sarah was too young to fully understand. After she went to bed, after Michael had finished his homework and retreated to his room, after I'd cleaned the kitchen and folded the laundry and done all the small tasks that kept me from thinking, I sat alone in the dark living room, staring at nothing. The house was silent except for the tick of the grandfather clock. Tick, 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 each second falling like a stone into still water. I felt the tears I'd been holding back for months finally spill over. They ran down my face silently, soaking into the collar of my shirt. I didn't make a sound. I'd learned to cry quietly, so the children wouldn't hear, so no one would know how much I was breaking apart inside. I knew then, with certainty, what I'd been refusing to admit to myself. My husband was having an affair. My husband was in love with his secretary. My perfect life was a lie. And I had no idea what to do about it. The truth came out on a cold Tuesday in March. One of those early spring days, when winter refuses to let go. When the sky is gray and heavy with rain that never quite falls. I wasn't looking for the truth. Sometimes I think that made it worse, the fact that I wasn't actively snooping. That the betrayal simply fell into my lap like rotten fruit from a poisoned tree. That my friend Linda called me that afternoon. I was folding laundry in the living room, the television on but muted, playing some soap opera I wasn't watching. When the phone rang, I almost didn't answer. I was tired, hollowed out by months of suspicion and silence, but something made me pick up. Her voice was tight, uncomfortable. "Mary, I need to tell you something. I'm sorry. I've been debating whether to call, but I think you deserve to know." My hand stilled on the shirt I was folding. "What is it?" "I saw David yesterday, at Rosselli's." Rosselli's was an intimate Italian restaurant downtown. The kind of place with red leather booths and candles on every table, with soft lighting and romantic music. David had taken me there for our 15th anniversary, 3 years ago. We'd shared fettuccine alfredo and split a tiramisu, and he'd held my hand across the table and told me he loved me. He wasn't alone, Linda continued, each word clearly painful for her to say. He was with a young woman, blonde, pretty. They were holding hands across the table. He kissed her. I saw him lean across and kiss her, right there in the restaurant. And she wasn't pulling away. She was kissing him back. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I stood in my living room, the phone pressed to my ear, feeling as if the floor had opened beneath me. The laundry basket tipped over, spilling clothes across the carpet. I watched them fall in slow motion, David's shirt, Sarah's dress, Michael's jeans, all tumbling together in a heap. Linda was still talking, asking if I was okay, asking if I needed her to come over, but I couldn't hear her over the rushing sound in my ears. I must have thanked her for telling me. I must have hung up the phone, but I don't remember doing it. I only remember sliding down to sit on the cold floor, hugging my knees, surrounded by the laundry I'd washed and folded 1,000 times, and realizing that deep down, I'd known for months. The rest of that afternoon passed in a blur. I picked up the laundry. I finished folding it. I started dinner, chicken and rice, something simple. I picked up Sarah from school and listened to her chatter about her day without really hearing the words. I helped Michael with his math homework, going through the motions of normalcy while my mind spun. I decided not to react immediately. I needed to think, to plan. If I confronted him now, emotional and unprepared, he'd deny it or minimize it or somehow make it my fault. I knew this with the instinct of a woman who'd been slowly gaslit for months. So I waited. When David came home that evening, of course, smelling of that perfume I'd come to HIA, was sitting at the kitchen table. The kids were at friends' houses. I'd arranged it earlier, calling other mothers and asking for favors, saying I needed a few hours. It was just us. We need to talk, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was too calm, too dead. The voice of a woman who'd already moved beyond pain into some cold, numb place. He froze in the doorway, briefcase in hand, his coat still on. For a moment, just a moment, I saw guilt flash across his face, raw and obvious and damning. Then it was gone, replaced by defensive wariness. About what? He asked, but his voice wavered. You were at Rosselli's yesterday, with Claire. He set down his briefcase very carefully, as if it might explode. His hands were shaking. Mary, please don't lie to me. Not now. I just need to hear the truth. For once, just tell me the truth. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. Should he deny it? Could he talk his way out of this? Then something in his posture changed. His shoulders sagged. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but not apologetic. I didn't mean for it to happen. Those words, those useless, cliché words that every cheater utters, as if intention somehow absolved responsibility. I felt something crack inside me, like ice breaking on a frozen lake. How long? I asked. He hesitated. Another calculation. How much to admit? How little could he get away with? How long, David? 6 months, maybe 7. 7 months. Half a year of lies, of pretending, of me trying harder, while he was already gone. 7 months of late nights and missed dinners and that perfume. 7 months of looking at me across the table and lying with his eyes. Do you love her? He didn't answer immediately, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know, more than words ever could. Mary, you have to understand, things between us. They've changed. You've changed. You're always tired, always focused on the kids. We never talk anymore. Not really. Not about anything that matters. Claire, she listens to me. She makes me feel what? I interrupted, my voice rising despite myself. Feel young, feel important, feel like you're not just a husband and father with responsibilities and a mortgage and a wife who gave up everything for you. That's not fair. I stood up, trembling, months of silence and suppressed emotion finally breaking through. You want to talk about fair? I gave up everything for you, David. My education, my career, my dreams. I spent 10 years raising your children, keeping your house, supporting your ambitions. I ironed your shirts and packed your lunches and smiled at your office parties. And you've been sleeping with a girl barely older than our son. She's 26, Mary. She's not a child. The way he defended her, the way he protected her, even now it hurt more than anything else, more than the affair, more than the lies. He was choosing her, standing in our kitchen, in the home we'd built together. He was choosing to defend her to me. Do you want a divorce? I asked, surprised by how steady my voice had become. I'd moved beyond anger, beyond hurt. I was in survival mode now. He looked relieved that I'd said it first. I think I need some time to figure things out, to clear my head. I'll stay at a hotel for a while. Take all the time you need, I said coldly. But David, when you leave tonight, you're not figuring things out. You're choosing. You're choosing her over your family, over your children, over 18 years of marriage. So when you walk out that door, own it. Don't pretend this is about needing space or clarity. You know exactly what you're doing. His face hardened. You've made me feel like a stranger in my own home for years, Mary. Like my only value was in my paycheck. Did you ever think about that? Did you ever consider that I might need more? I considered it every day for 18 years, I said quietly. Every single day. He packed a bag that night. I watched him move through our bedroom, throwing clothes into a suitcase, and felt nothing. Just that cold, numb emptiness where love used to live. Michael came home while David was carrying his suitcase to the car. I heard my son's bike clatter to the ground in the driveway, heard his footsteps pounding up the walk. He burst through the door and stopped, seeing his father with luggage, seeing me standing there with my arms crossed. "Where are you going?" Michael asked, his voice cracking. He was 10 years old, on the edge of adolescence, and I watched his face crumble as he realized what was happening. "Dad, where are you going?" I need to stay somewhere else for a little while," David said, unable to look at his son. "Why? What did we do?" "You didn't do anything, buddy. This is between your mom and me." "But it wasn't. It never is. When parents break apart, children are always collateral damage." Sarah cried herself to sleep that night, asking again and again what she'd done wrong, why Daddy was leaving, if he'd come back, if he still loved her. I held her small, shaking body and lied. "You did nothing wrong, baby. Nothing. Sometimes grown-ups have problems that have nothing to do with their children, but Daddy still loves you very much. He always will." Even then, I was protecting him. Even then, I couldn't bring myself to tell my children the truth about their father, about what he'd chosen over them. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the empty house around me. The grandfather clock ticked in the hallway. The heater kicked on and off. Outside, a dog barked. Normal sounds of a normal night, but nothing was normal anymore. Everything had changed, and it would never, ever be the same again. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. David moved into an apartment across town, a one-bedroom place, above a dry cleaner. Claire quietly resigned from her position at his company, though everyone knew why. The gossip spread through our small community like wildfire, jumping from neighbor to neighbor, from parent to parent at school pickup, whispered behind hands at the grocery store. I'd see other mothers at Sarah's school events, and they'd whisper as I passed. Their voices would drop, their eyes would slide toward me, and I'd pretend not to notice. Some pitied me, I could see it in the way they'd touched my arm and ask how I was doing with exaggerated concern. Some seemed to take satisfaction in my downfall, as if it confirmed that no one's perfect life was real, as if my pain validated their own insecurities. The few friends who stuck by me told me I should fight for my marriage, go to counseling, do whatever it took to win him back. "He's just going through a midlife crisis," Margaret Henderson said over coffee one afternoon. "All men do this, but if you're patient, if you make him remember why he fell in love with you, he'll come back." They always do. But I was too tired to fight. And more than that, I was too proud. I wouldn't beg someone to love me. I wouldn't compete with a 26-year-old secretary for my own husband's affection. If he wanted her that badly, he could have her. David filed for divorce 3 months later. I'd known it was coming, but seeing the papers still hurt. 18 years of marriage, reduced to legal documents and division of assets. Claire was with him at the courthouse, saw them together in the parking lot, her hand on his arm in a gesture of comfort or possession. I couldn't tell which. She wore a professional pantsuit, her hair pulled back, trying to look respectable. She had the decency to look away when our eyes met. He did not. The divorce was quick, relatively amicable by legal standards. His lawyer was efficient, professional, clearly eager to wrap things up so David could move on with his new life. My lawyer, a tired-looking woman who took my case pro bono, after I explained I had no money, did her best to advocate for me, but there wasn't much to fight over. David agreed to child support and alimony, though the amounts were far less than what I needed. His lawyer argued that since I had no income history, no recent work experience, I couldn't claim lost wages or career opportunities. The judge, an older man who barely looked up from his paperwork, agreed. I got the house saddled with a mortgage I couldn't afford, and primary custody of the children. David got his freedom and his secretary. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, signing papers that dissolved 18 years of marriage, and feeling nothing. Just a vast, cold emptiness where love used to be. My hand holding the pen didn't shake. I signed my maiden name with a steady hand, Mary Elizabeth Patterson becoming Mary Elizabeth Coleman again, as if I could reverse time, undo everything, go back to the girl I'd been before David. The hardest part wasn't the heartbreak, though, that was considerable. It was the practical reality of survival. The alimony barely covered the mortgage, child support helped, but raising 2 children on my own meant I needed more, much more. I swallowed my pride and got a job at the elementary school cafeteria. The pay was minimum wage. In fact, but the hours worked around the children's schedules, and I got summers off. I'd serve lunch to kids who'd once played at my house, whose mothers now looked at me with that mixture of pity and relief that I'd come to recognize. Sloppy Joe or tuna melt. I'd ask, plastic-gloved hands holding a serving spoon, wearing a hairnet and an apron with stains that wouldn't come out. Some of the kids were kind, some pretended not to know me, some whispered to their friends as they moved through the line, pointing at me, the fallen woman serving their food. In the evenings, I took in sewing and alterations. I'd sit under a lamp until midnight, mending hems and taking in waistbands, my fingers cramping, my eyes burning with exhaustion. Mrs. Chen from down the street brought me her family's mending. Linda spread the word, and soon I had a small, steady stream of work. $5 to hem pants, $10 to alter a dress, $20 to take in a wedding gown. I learned to do our own home repairs, from library books, fixing leaky faucets, patching drywall, unclogging drains, things David had always handled. I'd stand in the garage, surrounded by tools I barely knew how to use, reading instruction manuals and trying not to cry from frustration. The bills were relentless: electric, gas, water, mortgage, car payment, groceries, school supplies. Each month was a puzzle: which bills could be paid late, which companies would accept partial payments. How could I stretch $1 until it screamed? I created elaborate systems to keep track, a notebook where I wrote down every penny that came in, every penny that went out. I'd sit at the kitchen table late at night, surrounded by envelopes and calculators, and that growing sense of panic, doing mathematical gymnastics to make the numbers work. They never quite worked. I made decisions no mother should have to make. Did Michael need new shoes more than Sarah needed her field trip money? Could I skip my dentist appointment for myself and put that money toward the broken washing machine? Was it okay to buy die-old bread and bruised fruit if it meant we could afford milk? One Christmas, when money was particularly tight, I wrapped gifts from the thrift store and pretended they were new. I watched my children's faces light up over secondhand toys and felt both grateful and ashamed. Grateful that they were happy, ashamed that I couldn't provide more. The loneliness was crushing. I had no one to share the burden with. No one to tell about Sarah's first school play where she played a tree and forgot her only line. No one to commiserate with about Michael's struggle with algebra, or to celebrate when he finally understood quadratic equations. No one to make me laugh when everything felt impossible. No one to hold me when I cried. David came for his court-mandated visits every other weekend. He'd pull up in a new car, sleek and expensive. Everything our old station wagon wasn't tanned. The children would run out to meet him. He'd bring guilt gifts, video games for Michael, dolls for Sarah, things I couldn't afford, buying their affection with money that should have been going to child support. The children would return from his apartment on Sunday evenings full of stories about Claire, how she made homemade cookies, how she was learning to play video games with Michael, how she'd taken Sarah shopping for school clothes at the mall. Each story was a knife in my heart, twisted slowly. "Miss Claire is really nice, Mom," Sarah said one night, brushing her teeth before bed. She let me pick out any outfit I wanted. She said I have good taste. I smiled through gritted teeth. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Do you think you'd like her if you met her? Like, really met her?" The innocence in her question nearly broke me. My 8-year-old daughter, trying to bridge the gap between her two worlds, not understanding that Claire had burned that bridge before Sarah even knew it existed. "Maybe," I lied, "but it's complicated between grown-ups, honey." Michael began acting out. He'd been such a sweet boy, helpful and considerate, but suddenly he was angry all the time, fighting at school, talking back, slamming doors so hard the pictures rattled on the walls. His grades dropped. His teacher called, concerned. I sat through parent-teacher conferences alone, trying to explain a situation I could barely understand myself. One night, around 2 in the morning, I woke to sounds coming from Michael's room. I found him crying into his pillow, his shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed too big for his 10-year-old body. "Baby, what's wrong?" I sat on his bed, putting my hand on his back. "I hate him," he sobbed, turning to bury his face in my shoulder. I hate Dad for leaving us. I hate him. I hate him so much. I held my son, feeling his pain mix with my own, and felt my resolve harden into something unbreakable. I made a choice in that moment, one that would define the next decade of our lives, one that would cost me dearly but that I believed was right. Don't hate your father, I said quietly, stroking his hair. He made mistakes, but he's still your dad. He still loves you. Then why did he leave? How do you explain adult betrayal to a child? How do you tell your son that his father chose lust over love, youth over commitment, excitement over responsibility? Sometimes people hurt each other without meaning to. Sometimes love changes, but his love for you hasn't changed. Michael, never doubt that. Whatever happens between your father and me, you are still his son, and he loves you. It was a lie, or at least a kindness dressed as truth, but I couldn't bear for my children to grow up poisoned by hatred. I'd seen what that did to people, how it twisted them inside, made them bitter and hard. I wouldn't let that happen to my babies, so I swallowed my own bitterness and taught them. Forgiveness I didn't feel. I never spoke ill of their father in front of them. When they'd come home from visits and tell me about Claire, I'd listen and nod and ask questions as if I cared. When David forgot to pay child support on time, which happened more and more frequently, I'd make excuses for him. He's probably just busy at work. I'm sure the check will come soon. I never told them about the affair, about how Claire had pursued their father, about the real reason our family fell apart. When they asked Dan, they did ask, repeatedly, desperately trying to understand. I gave vague answers about people growing apart, about adult problems they wouldn't understand when they were older. Did you stop loving Daddy? Sarah asked once, her eyes wide and worried. No, sweetheart, I loved him very much. Sometimes love isn't enough. Will I end up like you when I grow up? Will someone leave me? The question gutted me. My 7-year-old daughter, already afraid of abandonment, already learning that love wasn't safe. No, baby, you're going to find someone wonderful who loves you the way you deserve to be loved. And you're going to be so much smarter than me. You're going to know your worth. I smiled when David picked them up for visits, even when every fiber of my being wanted to scream at him. I was gracious when he showed up late. I asked politely about his life, about his work, pretending we were friendly exes instead of a broken family. My silence became its own kind of prison. Friends would ask if I was okay, and I'd say yes. Family would offer to help, and I'd decline. We're managing, I'd say, with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The kids and I are doing just fine. But I wasn't fine. I was drowning, but I kept my head above water through sheer force of will, refusing to let anyone see me sink. At night, after the children were asleep, I'd allow myself to fall apart. I'd sit in the bathtub with the water running so they couldn't hear me cry. I'd sob into dish towels while doing laundry in the garage. I'd weep silently into my pillow, my face pressed into the mattress so hard I could barely breathe. Years passed. Michael graduated from middle school, then high school. Sarah followed. They became good people, kind, responsible, hardworking. They maintained a relationship with their father, though it was complicated. They loved him, even if they didn't always understand him. They spent holidays split between two homes, their lives divided in ways children's lives shouldn't be. And I was glad, despite everything, despite the cost to myself, I was glad I'd protected that relationship. They needed a father, even a flawed one. But the personal cost was staggering. I aged rapidly during those years. The stress, the constant work, the endless worry, it carved itself into my face, my body, my soul. I found gray hairs in my 30s. Lines appeared around my eyes and mouth. My hands became rough from cleaning and sewing and manual labor. My body ached constantly. I stopped looking in mirrors. I stopped imagining a different life. I stopped believing in happy endings or second chances or justice. I just survived, day by day, until survival became its own kind of existence. When Michael left for college on a scholarship, thank God for that scholarship, I stood in his empty room and cried, not from sadness, but from relief. One child successfully launched, one child who'd made it through despite everything. Sarah followed 4 years later, heading to a state school to study education. She wanted to be a teacher, to help children, to make a difference. I was so proud of her I could barely speak. And then, suddenly, I was alone. The house that had once been full of laughter, and fighting, and music, and life was silent. Just me and the grandfather clock, ticking away the hours. I was 52 years old. I'd spent 20 years in survival mode. and I didn't know how to do anything else. 20 years passed. 20 years of scraping by, of watching my children grow and build their own lives, of learning to be alone without being lonely. I was 72 years old. My hair had gone completely white, which I wore in a simple bun. My hands were gnarled with arthritis. I moved slower now, more carefully, but I was still here, still standing. Michael was a software engineer in Seattle with a wife named Jennifer and two children, Nima, age 8, and Daniel, age 5. Sarah was a teacher in San Francisco, engaged to a kind man named Thomas who made her laugh and treated her like she was precious. I was proud of them, so proud it hurt. I still lived in the same house, though I'd finally paid off the mortgage 5 years ago. The rooms that once echoed with children's voices were filled now with books and plants and gentle silence. I'd left the cafeteria job a decade ago, and now worked part-time at the local library quarter. Gentler work that suited my aging body. I shelved books and helped patrons find what they needed and sometimes read to children during story hour. I had a small garden where I still grew tomatoes and roses. I had a few friends, women my age who'd also survived their own trials. We'd meet for coffee and talk about our grandchildren and our aches and pains and what to watch on television. A simple life, a peaceful life. I'd made peace with my choices, or so I told myself. The bitterness had faded over the years, replaced by a kind of resigned acceptance. This was my life. It wasn't what I'd planned, but it was mine. It was a Thursday afternoon in October when everything changed again. The leaves were turning gold, and I was sitting in my garden, deadheading roses, when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. The number was unfamiliar, probably a telemarketer. But something made me wipe the dirt from my hands and pick up. Hello. Silence, then heavy breathing, then a voice, thin and wavering, barely recognizable. Mary. It's Claire. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The phone felt heavy in my hand. Claire. After 20 years of silence, of carefully constructing a life that didn't include her, of never saying her name aloud, she was calling me. My hand tightened on the phone. What do you want? My voice came out harder than I intended. Her voice broke, and I heard her struggle to compose herself. I'm sorry to call. I know I have no right, but I didn't know who else to turn to. Please, don't hang up. She sounded old. That was the strange thing. Not young and bright the way I remembered from that Christmas party 35 years ago, but defeated and worn and desperate. Why are you calling me, Claire? It's David. He's very sick. Cancer. Stage 4, pancreatic. The doctors say there's nothing they can do. 3 months, maybe less. I should have felt something: sadness, shock, even satisfaction, but I felt numb. David was dying. The man I'd once loved enough to give up everything for was dying, and I felt nothing. I'm sorry to hear that, I said automatically, the same thing I'd say to any acquaintance sharing bad news. That's not why I called. She was crying now, soft, broken sobs. He left me, Mary, 3 years ago. He had another affair, with someone from his new job, someone younger. Just like he left you for me. He divorced me just like he divorced you. Took everything in the settlement because he had better lawyers. I have no savings, no retirement, no family nearby. And now he's dying, and he won't even see me. He won't even take my calls. I'm alone. I'm completely alone. The irony was so sharp it could have cut glass. The woman who'd destroyed my marriage, who'd taken my husband, who'd helped raise my children in stolen moments, she was calling me because she was alone. Why are you telling me this? Because, She took a shuddering breath. Because I need you to know that you were right. About everything. I thought I was special. That what we had was real. But I was just someone young and convenient. And then I wasn't young anymore. And he found someone who was. And now I have nothing. I lost everything, just like you did. And I'm sorry. God, Mary, I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I sat down slowly on my garden bench, my legs suddenly weak. The roses I'd been tending swayed in the breeze. A.B. buzzed past. The world kept moving, indifferent to this strange moment of cosmic justice. I know it doesn't matter, she continued, her words tumbling out in a desperate rush. I know it's 35 years too late. I know nothing I say can undo what I did. But I need you to know that I'm sorry for everything. You didn't deserve what we did to you. You were innocent, and we destroyed your life. And I've paid for it. God, how I've paid for it. For 20 years, I'd wondered what I'd say if I ever got the chance to confront her. I'd imagined righteous anger, cutting words, the satisfaction of making her feel a fraction of the pain she'd caused me. I'd rehearsed speeches in my head, devastating monologues that would reduce her to tears, but sitting there, listening to her sob, I felt only tired. "Where are you, Claire?" "What?" She sounded shocked that I'd asked. "Where are you right now?" She gave me an address, a care facility on the edge of town, the kind of place for people who have nowhere else to go, the kind of place where people go to die alone. "I'll come see you," I heard myself say, "tomorrow afternoon." You will, but why?" I didn't have an answer for her. I didn't have an answer for myself. "I'll be there at 2. I hung up and sat in my garden for a long time, watching the shadows lengthen, trying to understand why I'd agreed to see her. Maybe curiosity, maybe closure, maybe because I knew it was the last piece of this decades-long story that needed to be written. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about David, dying. After all these years, after all the pain and struggle and silent endurance, he was dying. I tried to feel something: sadness for the man I'd once loved, satisfaction that karma had caught up with him, something, but there was only emptiness. The care facility was depressing: beige walls, fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered, the smell of disinfectant barely covering the scent of age and illness and death. The receptionist directed me to the second floor, room 247. I climbed the stairs slowly, my arthritic knees protesting, giving myself time to prepare for whatever I was about to face. When I knocked, a voice I barely recognized called out for me to enter. She sat in a wheelchair by the window, and for a moment, I thought there'd been a mistake. This couldn't be Claire. The woman I remembered had been vibrant, beautiful, full of youth's easy confidence and casual cruelty. This woman was gaunt and gray, her blonde hair thin and faded to a dull yellow, her face lined with pain and regret. Her hands shook with a tremor she couldn't control. She looked older than me, though she couldn't have been more than 6. "Mary," she whispered, "you came. I didn't think you would." I stepped into the room, taking in the sparse furnishings: a narrow bed with white sheets, a small dresser, a television mounted on the wall, currently off, nothing personal except a single photograph on the nightstand. I couldn't see who was in it from where I stood. I sat in the chair across from her, studying her face, this stranger who'd once held so much power over my life. "You called." "I came. I didn't think you would. After everything. Neither did I." We sat in silence for a moment. She looked at me with watery eyes, and I looked back, neither of us knowing how to begin this conversation we should have had 35 years ago. "You look good," Claire said finally. "Healthy. You've aged well." I almost laughed at the transparent lie. "No, I haven't, but I've survived. That's more than I can say." She gestured to herself with a weak, bitter smile. "I have about 6 months left, if I'm lucky. Liver disease. Turns out drinking yourself to sleep every night for 2 decades catches up with you. Who knew?" "I'm sorry. Are you?" She looked at me directly for the first time, and I saw challenge in her eyes despite her weakness. "Are you really?" I considered the question honestly. "Yes," I said finally. "I'm sorry you're in pain. I'm sorry you're dying alone. I'm sorry your life led you here. But Claire, I'm not sorry for you because you deserve my sympathy. I'm sorry because this is a human ending, and no human deserves to die alone and afraid." She nodded slowly, tears spilling down her sunken cheeks. "That's fair. That's more than fair. More than I deserve. Why did you really call me? You didn't need to tell me about David. You didn't need to apologize. So why?" "Because I need to tell someone the truth before I die. And you're the only person who deserves to hear it." She took a shaky breath. "And because I've been carrying this guilt for 35 years, and it's killing me faster than the disease." I waited, saying nothing. "I knew he was married," she said softly, her eyes fixed on her trembling hands. "From the first day I started working for him. I knew he had a wife and children. I saw your picture on his desk, you and the kids at the beach, everyone laughing. I saw how he looked at that photo sometimes, with this soft smile. But I wanted him anyway." Her voice grew stronger, as if confession was giving her energy she shouldn't have. "I was young and stupid and selfish, and I thought I could make him happier than you could. I thought I deserved him more because we connected intellectually, because we worked together, because I understood his ambitions. I told myself you'd probably let yourself go, that you'd become boring, that you weren't meeting his needs." She laughed bitterly, a sound like breaking glass. "I pursued him, Mary. He resisted at first. I want you to know that, for months, he talked about his family, about you, about the kids. He'd show me pictures from Michael's baseball games. He'd tell me about Sarah's piano recitals. He seemed happy when he talked about you all, but I was relentless. The words should have hurt, but I felt oddly detached, as if she was talking about a different life, different people, a different version of me that no longer existed. I'd stay late to work with him, even when there wasn't much work to do. I'd wear clothes that got his attention, nothing too obvious, but enough. Low-cut blouses, skirts instead of pants. I'd lean over his desk to point at documents, make sure he noticed me. I'd laugh at his jokes and make him feel brilliant and important. I'd touch his arm, his hand, finding excuses for casual contact. I seduced him deliberately, methodically. She looked up at me, and there was something like defiance in her eyes, even now. And when we finally got together, when he finally kissed me in his office, after everyone else had gone home, I told myself I wasn't the villain. I told myself, you must not appreciate him, that you'd let yourself go, that you didn't deserve him. I created this whole narrative where I was the heroine rescuing him from a loveless marriage. But it wasn't loveless, was it? I said quietly. No. She was crying harder now. He told me later, after we were married, when he was cheating on me with Stephanie from his new office. He said he'd loved you, that leaving you was the biggest mistake of his life, that I'd never be what you were to him, never give him what you gave him, that I was just a distraction, a midlife crisis, a mistake. I felt tears prick my eyes for the first time, not from sadness, but from a strange, painful validation. After all these years, to know that he'd regretted it, that he'd known what he'd lost. He told me this while he was sleeping with a 20-odd-year-old from his new office. Karma's funny that way, isn't it? Claire, no, let me finish. She gripped the arms of her wheelchair, her knuckles white. I need to say this. You were the good one, Mary. You were the one who sacrificed and stayed silent and protected your children. You were the one who worked 2 jobs and held your head high and forgave him in your heart even when you didn't have to. You were strong and dignified and good. She was sobbing now, her thin shoulders shaking. I destroyed your family, and you could have destroyed me with the truth. You could have poisoned your children against him, against me. You could have told everyone what we did, humiliated us publicly. But you didn't. You just carried it, alone, in silence. I stayed silent for my children, I said quietly. Not for you, not for him. I didn't want my babies growing up with hatred in their hearts. I didn't want them to spend their lives torn between loving their father and hating what he'd done. They deserved better than that. I know, but it was still grace I didn't deserve, grace I never earned, and I've thought about it every day for 35 years. I looked at this broken woman, this stranger who'd once held so much power over my life, and I realized something profound. She'd been a victim too, not of me, but of her own choices, her own illusions, her own desperate need to be special, to matter, to believe she was worth destroying a family for. You took everything from me, I said, my voice steady and sure. My marriage, my peace, my children's innocence, their sense of security. You took the life I'd built and burned it to the ground. And for years, for decades, I hated you. God, how I hated you. She nodded, accepting it, not trying to defend herself. But I never took revenge. I never told the children the truth about the affair until they were adults. I never poisoned them against their father or against you. I never called your work or sabotaged you or any of the 1,000 things I could have done. And you want to know why? Because I knew the truth would speak one day, without me saying a word. I knew that the same man who could betray me could betray you. I knew that someone who would pursue a married man had the morals to do it again, or to be done too. I knew that selfishness and weakness and poor character don't change just because you get what you want. I leaned forward, looking directly into her eyes. I didn't need revenge, Claire. Life gave me justice. You got exactly what you deserved. You got him, and then you got to experience exactly what I experienced. Betrayal, abandonment, financial ruin, loneliness. The only difference is that I had my children, and you have nothing. She was sobbing now, her hands covering her face, her whole body shaking. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are, and I forgive you. The words surprised us both. I hadn't planned to say them. They just came out, spontaneous and true. Sitting there, looking at the wreckage of what her choices had wrought, I realized that forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for me. I'd carried the weight of that betrayal for 35 years. I was tired of carrying it. You forgive me, she whispered, disbelieving. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, not because it erases what you did or makes it okay, but because I deserve peace. I deserve to let go of the anger that's been eating at me for decades. I deserve to move forward without the weight of your mistakes on my shoulders. I stood to leave, and she reached out, grabbing my hand with surprising strength for someone so frail. Your children, she said urgently. Do they know the whole truth? They know now, I replied. I told them last year. They're adults. They deserved to know their history, to understand why their childhood was the way it was. And her voice was barely a whisper. And they were angry. At both of you. At him for betraying me. At you for pursuing him. But they understood why I stayed silent. They told me I was stronger than they ever knew. Sarah said I taught her what real strength looks like, not fighting back, but rising above. I gently extracted my hand from hers. Goodbye, Claire. I hope you find peace before the end. I hope you can forgive yourself the way I've forgiven you, though I suspect that's harder. Mary, she called as I reached the door. Thank you for coming, for listening, for showing me grace I never showed you. I nodded and walked out of that room, down the corridor with its flickering lights and worn linoleum, out into the October sunshine, and for the first time in 35 years, I felt light. The burden I'd been carrying of silence, of anger, of unspoken truth, lifted from my shoulders like a physical weight. I drove home slowly, taking the long way, past the old elementary school where I'd worked in the cafeteria, past the park where my children used to play. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at my house, my home, the place I'd fought so hard to keep, the place that had witnessed so much pain and struggle and quiet triumph, and I smiled. 72 years old now. The house is quiet, most days just me and my books and my garden and my memories, but it's a good quiet, a peaceful quiet, different from the lonely silence of those early years after David left. This is chosen solitude, comfortable solitude. Michael and his family visit often. My granddaughter, Emma, is 8 now, the same age Sarah was when everything fell apart. She has David's eyes, which used to pain me, but now I just see new life, new possibilities, a future untainted by old mistakes. She's smart and funny and kind, everything I hoped my grandchildren would be. Last month, she asked me about Grandpa David. We were in the garden together, planting bulbs for spring, our hands dirty with soil. Grandma, did you love Grandpa? She asked, her small voice serious. Very much. I told her honestly. When I was young, I loved him more than anything. Daddy says Grandpa made mistakes, that he wasn't always nice to you. I looked at my granddaughter, at her innocent face smudged with dirt, and chose my words carefully. Your grandpa was human, sweetheart. Humans make mistakes, sometimes big ones. The important thing is what we do after the mistakes, how we grow, how we treat people, how we try to be better. Are you sad he died? I thought about it, really thought about it. I'm sad for the man he could have been, I said finally. I'm sad for the family we could have had, but I'm not sad about my life. I have your daddy, and your Aunt Sarah, and you and Daniel. I have a good life. She nodded, satisfied, and went back to digging holes for the tulip bulbs. Sarah comes every Sunday for lunch. She's pregnant with her first child now, a boy she plans to name Marcus. She rests her hand on her belly protectively, the way I used to when I was carrying her, and talks about the kind of mother she wants to be, the kind of home she wants to create. I want my son to grow up seeing a healthy relationship, she told me last week. I want him to see his father treat me with respect, to see us work through problems together, to know what real love looks like. You'll give him that, I assured her. You and Thomas are good together, really good. I learned from you, Mom. You showed me what strength looks like, what grace looks like, how to survive impossible things. They know the full story now, both of them. Last year, on what would have been my 50th wedding anniversary, I finally told them everything, about the affair, about Claire, about the years of struggle and silence. We sat in my living room, the three of us, and I laid it all out: the betrayal, the poverty, the deliberate choice to protect their relationship with their father despite what he'd done. They were shocked, then angry, then overwhelmingly grateful. Why didn't you tell us? Michael had asked, his voice thick with emotion, tears streaming down his face. All those years, we thought you were just sad about the divorce. We didn't understand what you went through. We thought you just drifted apart. You were children, I replied simply. You needed to love your father. You needed to grow up without that burden of knowing he'd betrayed us. that he'd chosen someone else over his family. You deserved an uncomplicated relationship with him. Sarah had cried then, holding me tight, her tears soaking into my shoulder, the way mine had soaked into hers so many times when she was small. You're the strongest person I've ever known, Mom. I don't know how you did it, how you stayed silent all those years, how you protected us from the truth. You do what you have to do, I said. When you're a mother, you find strength you didn't know you had. You survive things you never thought you could survive, because giving up isn't an option when someone depends on you. David died 3 years ago. The cancer took him quickly in the end, just like the doctors predicted. I went to the funeral not for him, but for my children, who needed their mother there. The service was small. He hadn't maintained many friendships over the years. Claire was there too, in her wheelchair, alone in the back row. Our eyes met across the cemetery, and we shared a small nod. No words. None were needed. She died 4 months later. I didn't attend that funeral. After David's service, as people milled around eating tasteless sandwiches and making uncomfortable small talk, Michael asked me if I'd ever loved anyone after Dad, if I'd ever even tried. I thought about it carefully before answering. I learned to love myself, I told him. I learned that I was enough, just as I was, that I didn't need a man to complete me, or validate me, or give my life meaning, and that kind of love, that self-love, is more powerful than any romance could ever be. He'd hugged me then, this grown man who used to be my angry little boy, and whispered, "I love you, Mom," into my hair. These days, I volunteer at a women's shelter 3 days a week. I work with women who are going through divorces, who are rebuilding their lives after betrayal, who are learning to be strong on their own. I tell them my story, not all of it, but enough. I tell them that silence can be strength, that patience can be power, that survival is its own kind of victory. I tell them that revenge is tempting, but unnecessary, that the truth will always come out eventually, that protecting your children is worth any sacrifice, that grace isn't weakness, it's the hardest form of strength there is. Last week, a young woman came to the shelter with 2 small children. Her husband had left her for his co-worker. She was devastated, angry, broke. She wanted to tell her children the truth, wanted them to know what their father had done. I sat with her in the common room, holding her hands while she cried. "If you tell them now," I said gently, "you'll feel better temporarily. You'll get that satisfaction of poisoning their image of him. But in 10 years, 20 years, those children will resent you for taking their father from them, for making them choose, for burdening them with adult pain when they were just kids. But they deserve to know the truth." She sobbed. "They do. Eventually. When they're old enough to process it, when they ask, but right now, they need both parents. Even a flawed father is better than no father, than a father they've been taught to hate." I don't know if she listened. I hope she did. I hope I saved her children from some of the pain mine could have experienced. I sit in my garden on summer evenings, watching the roses bloom, the same roses I planted 40 years ago, the ones that survived neglect and harsh winters and still come back beautiful every spring. They remind me of myself, pruned back, frostbitten, struggling sometimes, but still growing, still blooming, still here. People ask me if I'm bitter, if I regret the choices I made, if I wish I'd fought harder, or spoken up sooner, or burned it all down in righteous anger. And I tell them no, because I look at my children, good, kind, successful people who aren't poisoned by hatred. I know I made the right choice. They have healthy relationships with their own partners. They're good parents. They know how to love without bitterness, how to forgive without forgetting, how to be strong without being cruel. That's my legacy. Not the pain I endured, but the grace I chose. I stayed silent not because I was weak, but because I wanted my children to see that strength doesn't shout, it endures. I forgave not because David and Claire deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I survived not because I was extraordinary, but because I had no choice but to be ordinary in extraordinary circumstances. And when the truth finally spoke, when Claire called me from that care facility and confessed everything, when my children learned what I'd carried alone all those years, the truth was louder than any revenge could ever be. It vindicated my silence. It validated my choice. It showed my children what real strength looks like. I'm not proud of the pain I endured. I'm not grateful for the betrayal, but I'm proud of who I became in spite of it. I'm proud that I didn't let bitterness consume me, that I didn't use my children as weapons, that I chose dignity over destruction. Emma is playing in the garden now, picking dandelions and calling them wishes. She runs to me with a fistful of flowers, her face bright with joy, her laugh like music. Make a wish, Grandma, she says, holding out a dandelion gone to seed. But I don't need to. I've already lived through my wishes and my nightmares. I've survived betrayal and poverty and loneliness. I've raised good children and found peace in silence, and learned that sometimes the greatest victory is simply refusing to be destroyed. I watched the dandelion seeds float away on the breeze, each one carrying a wish, a hope, a possibility. And I think about that young woman in the wedding photograph on my mantelpiece, the one who had no idea what was coming, who believed in happily ever after and forever, and promises that couldn't be broken. I want to tell her that she's stronger than she knows, that she survived things she can't imagine, that she faced betrayal and heartbreak and years of grinding poverty, and she come out the other side whole, that silence can be a weapon, and patience can be power, and truth will always, always find its way out. I want to tell her that the pain will be overwhelming at times, that she'll cry herself to sleep more nights than she can count, that she wonder if she can make it through another day. But she will. She wake up each morning and put one foot in front of the other, and somehow, impossibly, she survive. I want to tell her that her children will grow up to be remarkable people, that they'll thank her for her silence, that they'll understand one day what she sacrificed for them, that the love she shows them even in the hardest times, especially in the hardest times, will shape them into adults who know how to love deeply and forgive fully and stand strong in the face of adversity. I want to tell her that the man she married, the man she loves with everything she has, will break her heart. But that broken heart will teach her things an unbroken heart never could. It will teach her resilience. It will teach her that she is enough, all by herself, without anyone to complete her. I want to tell her that forgiveness isn't about the person who hurt you, it's about you. It's about refusing to let someone else's choices poison your future. It's about choosing peace over bitterness, grace over revenge, wisdom over wrath. Most of all, I want to tell her that she'll be okay, better than okay. She built a life from the rubble of her broken dreams, and it will be a good life, different than she planned, harder than she imagined, but ultimately beautiful in its own way. She learned to find joy in small things: a grandchild's laugh, a perfect rose bloom, a quiet evening with a good book. She learned that happiness doesn't come from having the perfect life, but from making peace with the life you have. But I can't tell her any of this. She's frozen in that photograph, young and hopeful, believing in forever. She have to learn it all the hard way. The only way any of us really learn anything by living through it. Emma tugs at my sleeve, pulling me back to the present. Grandma, you're not listening. I said, what did you wish for? I smile at her, at this beautiful child who carries my blood and my legacy, and I pull her into my lap carefully, mindful of my old bones. I didn't wish for anything, sweetheart. I was just thinking about how lucky I am. Lucky. But you're old, she says with the brutal honesty of children. I laugh, a real laugh that comes from somewhere deep inside. Yes, I am old. And that's exactly why I'm lucky. Because I lived long enough to see you, to see your father become the man he is, to see your Aunt Sarah happy and expecting her own baby. Some people don't get that. Some people's stories end too soon, but mine kept going. And look at all the beautiful things I got to see. She considers this seriously, then nods. When I'm old like you, I want to be happy too. You will be, I assure her. You'll have hard times, everyone does, but you'll get through them. You're strong, Emma. It runs in the family. She beams at this, then wriggles down from my lap and runs back to the garden, already on to the next adventure. I watch her go, this perfect, innocent child who has no idea yet what life might throw at her. And I send up a silent prayer that she'll never know the kind of pain I knew. But if she does, I hope she'll remember her grandmother, who survived, who endured, who found peace after the storm. The sun is setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The roses sway in the evening breeze. The grandfather clock chimes inside the house, marking another hour, another day, another year in this long, strange, beautiful life. I've been thinking lately about writing it all down, the whole story, not for publication or fame or vindication, but for my grandchildren, so they'll know where they came from, what their grandmother survived, why she made the choices she made, so they'll understand that families are complicated, that people are flawed, that love is messy and painful, and sometimes it's not enough, but also so they'll know that survival is possible, that grace is a choice, that silence can be powerful, that the truth always comes out, one way or another. And sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living well, living fully. refusing to let someone else's cruelty diminish you. Maybe I'll start tomorrow, or maybe I won't. Maybe some stories are better kept in the heart, passed down in pieces, through conversations over tea, through wisdom shared while planting gardens, through the simple act of living with integrity and showing the next generation what real strength looks like. People say silence is weakness. People say you should fight back, speak up, never let anyone get away with hurting you. And maybe that's true for some stories, for some people, for some kinds of pain. But for me, silence was survival. Silence was protection. Silence was a conscious, deliberate choice to put my children first, to refuse to poison their childhoods with adult pain, to trust that karma would find its way without my help. And it did. Oh, how it did. Claire died alone in that care facility, her body failing, her liver destroyed by years of alcohol abuse and regret. David died without the family he'd thrown away, without the children who might have comforted him in his final days, without the wife who'd once loved him enough to give up everything. They got exactly what they deserved, it because I punished them, but because life has a way of balancing the scales. Meanwhile, I'm still here, still standing, still planting gardens and baking cookies for my grandchildren and volunteering at the women's shelter and living each day with intention and grace. I won, not through revenge or retaliation or public humiliation. I won by surviving, by raising good children, by finding peace, by refusing to let their betrayal turn me into someone bitter and small and broken. I won by choosing silence when I could have chosen rage, by choosing forgiveness when I could have chosen hate, by choosing to build a life instead of burning down theirs. The truth spoke loudly enough on its own. Claire's confession in that sterile room, her tears and regrets and broken body, that was louder than anything I could have said 35 years ago. My children's respect and gratitude when they finally learned the whole story. That was sweeter than any revenge I could have taken. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is nothing at all. Sometimes the most powerful response is silence. Sometimes the greatest victory is simply enduring with grace and dignity and letting time reveal the truth. I learned that the hard way, through years of struggle and sacrifice and swallowing my pain so my children wouldn't choke on it, but I learned it. And now, sitting in my garden on this beautiful evening, surrounded by roses I planted and nurtured through hard seasons, watching my granddaughter play, I know I made the right choice. Emma runs back to me one more time, breathless and excited. Grandma, come see, I found a caterpillar. I stand up slowly, my joints protesting, and take her small hand in my wrinkled one. Show me, sweetheart. As we walk through the garden together, her chattering about the caterpillar and how it will become a butterfly, I realized this is what it was all for. This moment, this child, this peace, this simple joy of a late afternoon with my granddaughter, unencumbered by bitterness, unburdened by rage. I paid for this peace with years of silence and struggle, but looking at Emma's excited face, feeling the warmth of the setting sun, breathing in the scent of roses and fresh earth, it was worth it. Every tear, every lonely night, every bill I didn't know how to pay, every moment of doubt and fear and pain, it was all worth it because I'm free. Free from anger, free from the need for revenge, free from the weight of carrying someone else's sins. I'm just me, Mary Coleman, 72 years old, grandmother, survivor, gardener, storyteller, a woman who learned that sometimes silence speaks louder than words, that sometimes the greatest strength is gentleness, that sometimes winning looks like losing until enough time passes to see the whole picture. And the picture is beautiful, complicated and painful in places, yes, but beautiful nonetheless. The truth came out. Karma spoke. Justice was served not through my actions, but through the natural consequences of their choices. And I get to live out my days in peace, surrounded by people who love me, who respect me, who see me as a woman of strength and grace. That's my revenge. That's my victory. That's my vindication. I stayed silent, and in the end, that silence was the loudest sound of all.